Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Kim Yutani, and I'm a senior programmer with the Sundance Film Festival. Welcome to the 2017 Sundance Film Festival Hong Kong. We're really excited to be here for the fourth year in a row. And you're here for a panel. It's called The Art of Screenwriting. And we have 4 filmmakers with us today who will be talking to you about their process and their philosophy, and we hope you have come armed with questions for them. I want to just bring them up one by one. First, I will have Matt Spicer, who made Those Up. Brett Haley, the hero. This is very like talk show style.
Yeah, it's over.
David Lowery, made a ghost story. And Jeff Baena made The Little Hours.
That'd be good. Yeah.
Welcome, all of you. Thank you for coming to Hong Kong with us. It's great to have you all here. I want to address the fact that we have 4 white men on this panel. It was not originally conceived to be that. We did have a woman at one point, and it just so happened that we have 4 men. This is the mantle.
I'm not the standard, so.
Okay. But we really wanted to do a panel about screenwriting because often as programmers we're asked, like, what is the most important part of the film? And for me, I always say it's about the story. It's about the script. And without a good script, that is the most essential part of the film to me. So I'm really happy to have you all here, and I think that I will just launch in and ask you a question. I'm curious about you forum when you began telling stories, and in what form was your first storytelling experience? Jeff, do you want to start?
Yeah, I think the first story I remember writing was in 2nd grade. Just wrote a little short story. I wrote a lot of short stories. And then once my dad got a video camera, I was shooting movies all the time, like on video. Yeah, and this is like, when I was 16, I was deciding where I wanted to go to college, and I went to New York because I wanted to always go to NYU. And one of my friends knew that Woody Allen lived across the street from his building, and Woody Allen was like one of my favorite people. And so I took all those like short stories and stuff I was writing and like little essays up to that point, and I put them in a FedEx envelope, and I went to a vintage store and found like a delivery guy jacket. And I wrote W. Allen, and I put the address of his building that I just assumed he was in the penthouse. And I wrote a cover letter that was like, hey, Mr. Allen, like, I know you're super busy, but I love you, so much, and you're such an inspiration. If there's any time you had to check this out, like, let me know. And I'm assuming you're not gonna like get around to it. And then a week later, I got a letter from him, and he had read it all, and he was like, keep writing stories, it's cool. He sort of critiqued some. I had one act play in there, and he told me to kind of stay away from writing plays. But it was pretty cool because I didn't expect him to write back. So that kind of like made me want to continue writing.
Yeah, how can you follow that up? I started with comic books. I was drawing comic books as a kid in class instead of listening to whatever I was supposed to be doing. And then I would make films as well. And I ended up making my first feature-length film when I was 16. So I knew that that's what I wanted to do, and I was trying to practice very early on. And it was just something ingrained in me from an early age. But I think really I remember it's like sort of storyboarding, but with dialogue and characters, and you're building different episodes and things or different things. So I would just do those on like, ruled paper and staple them together, and I had like all sorts of those. So that's where I knew it really started. So.
I'm like Brett. I started drawing comics when I was really young, and but I also played with action figures.
Oh yeah, oh yeah, yeah.
And would create I had every Star Wars action figure. I would create elaborate, fan fiction, Star Wars fan fiction and stuff in my basement. So that's probably where it started. But I always just, had been I started writing, I guess, seriously when I was in high school, and then when I applied to USC, I didn't have the resources to make films. There was nobody in my town who wanted to make movies, and you can't make them by yourself. So when I was looking at colleges, USC didn't require you to submit a short film. So that's why I was they just required essays. So I worked on my essays for months and months and months leading up to that.
I just had a combination of everybody's, basically, except for Woody Allen's. Early on, when I was 5 or 6, I started just writing, again, fan fiction based on Star Wars and E.T. and just writing stories based on those movies. A lot of times it was just literal adaptations of them, but that transitioned into, at some point I got my hands on, when I was around 7, on a screen, The Empire Strikes Back screenplay, and saw how screenplays were laid out, so I started writing scripts, and they were only 1 or 2 pages, but I was still following that form, and I didn't have a video camera growing up, or television or anything, and so I transitioned to comic books because that was a way to tell stories visually within my means, because I just needed paper and pencil. So I was doing that for a long time, up until I finally had a high school job and was able to get a video camera and start making films. And then when I was, I started writing screenplays that were longer, and they became feature length. And like Brett, I made a feature film in high school, and no one will ever see it. And,
I'm putting mine on YouTube, in case anyone.
I think you should.
No, I would never show it to anyone. I can't.
But yeah, so same basic pathway.
I'm curious about the process in which you all write, and is it characters, or is it a story idea that grabs you, or does it just vary from film to film?
For me, everything's different, but I feel like for the most part, there's always been, I sort of gravitate towards a scene, one particular scene, and that dynamic, and then I sort of build it out from there. And it's almost like I see the movie from that scene, and then I realize what the movie has to be from that scene, generally.
I feel like whenever I'm about to start on something, I always have a sort of flash, probably sort of similar to what Jeff's talking about, but a flash of inspiration where it's almost like you can see the trailer for the movie in your head, and it's kind of wait, what does this mean? Whether you're listening to a piece of music or something, and so for me, it usually starts from the visual, and then it's working backwards from that. It's sort of what does this visual mean? Is the visual, if it's of a person, who is that person? How did they get in the situation? And kind of working backwards from, just some kind of image or series of images that have popped in my head.
And actually, Matt, I wanted to kind of introduce something that you brought for everybody to see. So maybe after David and Brett answer the question, then you can walk us through your show and tell item.
Cool.
It's similar. I usually start with a scene or just an idea for an exchange, or sometimes it's an image. But the thing that I always have that it's attached to is a tone. There's some abstract tone or feeling that I am excited by, that makes me feel that scene could sustain itself, or that I could extrapolate a full story from. So I usually have I'll sit down with an exchange between 2 characters, or a concept or a situation, and from that, if I can, if I'm excited enough about it, I'll, just dig into it and start finding the characters and finding the story. Although the story for me, usually, I don't think about it in terms of 3-act structures or anything like that, although those always fall into place when the time is right. But I usually am looking for a feeling that can sustain a feature-length film. I'm looking for a tone that I feel I can just dig into, and it comes from, an idea for a scene, or for a character or an image, but that's what usually gets me excited about it, is this tone that I'm after, and if I can figure out a way to sustain that, then I know that that idea is worth making into a film.
Yeah, I've never had the same thing pop up, when wanting to make a film. Like I remember the first proper feature I ever made, I was just on a train and I saw a bowling alley, kind of in the middle of nowhere. And I was like, what happens at that bowling alley? And that was it. I was like, I'm gonna write a movie about this girl who works on a bowling alley. And then, so sometimes it's as simple as that. It's just like, for me, I think the word would be curiosity. I'm just like, oh, I want to know what that person's life is like. I don't understand anything about that. People always are like, why did you make a film about a 70-year-old widow? It's like, because I just was curious about what that was like. And it came to me thematically. I think thematically, much like tone, but I think thematically there are stories that I want to tell. And I think, well, if I want to tell a story about loss, what's the best vehicle for that? And for me, it was like, well, a 70-year-old widow is better than, say, a film about a 30-year-old guy in Brooklyn. That's not going to do it. So
The other thing that always, for me, is like, it has to be a movie I want to see. Like, I have to, whatever the idea is, it's like, if it's presenting itself to me as a movie that I would like to see that film,
100%.
then I will explore it. If it's an idea that's just like, oh, that's interesting, maybe I'm curious about it, maybe it's like, it piques my curiosity, but if I don't really care that much about seeing that movie and paying, however much money a movie ticket costs to see it, then I won't pursue it further. It has to really excite me as a moviegoer.
that's the thing of like, people always say, like, do you make movies for yourself or do you make them for other people? And I say, well, it's both because I love movies. So if I want to see that movie, then in theory, I go and see all the movies, so in theory,
Exactly.
it would be both. I'm making it for me, but it's something that I would definitely go and see.
Precisely.
Yeah, there's a freedom in kind of realizing that you're actually not that unique, and if you think something's interesting, odds are there's probably a lot of people like you that will find that same thing interesting. And so I think, yeah, it's just trusting your gut and feeling like whatever you are interested in, other people will like that too.
How many of you saw Ingrid Goes West?
All right.
It's like 25%. It's pretty good.
All right, we'll see when we get to our movie.
I know. Let's see. I bet mine's like 12%.
Well, Matt, you brought the lookbook for Ingrid Goes West, and I really like that you are showing this to everybody because I think it presents a very holistic look at your film, and so.
Yeah, the guys are kind of ragging me because they're like, what does this have to do with screenwriting? I'm like, you'll see. No, actually, it's a perfect segue because what we were talking about earlier, when I'm either formulating the idea for something or writing something, I'll do two things usually. I'll create a playlist of songs that I think, whether or not they end up in the movie, they sort of represent the tone of the movie. They could be in the movie. And it really helps me write and sort of think of ideas, whether I'm walking my dog or just driving in the car or whatever. And then I'll also do a lot of research. I'll watch a lot of films, look at photography, books, or whatever, and I'll find images that I feel like are sort of like my Pinterest board, of like images that are striking to me that I either want to reference in the film or that I just find inspiring or capture a certain feeling, and I'll sort of put those in a folder on my desktop. And then, when I go out to try and raise money for the film, I'll put together like a lookbook thing, which I did for Ingrid, and that's sort of it's a sales tool because it's hard for people to visualize, and especially as a first-time director, to really trust that you can bring the script that you wrote to life and that you have a vision for it. And so the idea is to just give them a little bit more confidence that you know what you're talking about, and understand the world and the characters, and that you know how to execute this. Okay, so this is the title page. I found a font that I thought was cool. And then that image is from Jim Jarmusch's Night on Earth. So these are all Instagrams that I pulled that I felt like were, either to the world of Taylor in the film and some stuff that she would post. So just for people who haven't seen the film, so the film is about a young woman named Ingrid who becomes obsessed with an Instagram influencer named Taylor, and Ingrid decides to move to LA to try and become friends with Taylor in real life. So she's kind of, seduced by these images she sees on her phone and decides to try and make that world her reality as well.
I was just noticing that this girl here in her bikini quotes Ralph Waldo Emerson.
Oh yeah, we literally stole that.
Is that real?
That's in the film, yeah. And that quote is real.
You really saw that in Tulum, Mexico?
He really, yeah. Tulum, Mexico.
Yeah, these just made me laugh, and I just thought, that if we could capture this vibe, then we would do a good job. We can go on to the next area. I haven't read this in a while, so please don't judge me for this. So this was my sort of director's statement, and again, you can see I really enjoy looking at fonts online and looking for the font that represents me. But this is just me sort of talking about why I wrote the film and wanted to direct it, and like the films that inspired me. You can see at the bottom were King of Comedy, Chuck and Buck, Young Adult, Count to Mr. Ripley. So these are all the films that I was watching as we were writing and just sort of like pulling from for inspiration, whether it's tone or characters or anything like that. Next slide. Just a nice sky picture. Yeah, here we go. So this is, for those of you who are fans of the show Flaked on Netflix, you can see there's Will Arnett. This is sort of my LA during the day inspiration. So I just wanted to capture that sort of fun, colorful, bright vibe of Los Angeles during the day, and sort of in terms of a color palette and aesthetic. You can go to the next one. Yeah, there we go. So this is LA at night. It's a little bit more sinister. People, I don't know if you've seen the film, but there's literally a shot, like the lower left-hand corner of them sitting by the pool, that we kind of really used that as an inspiration, but where they're really silhouetted by the light. But, LA just has a different vibe at night, and we wanted to show both sides of it. This is Joshua Tree, this is the desert. The next slide will be, so this is like, they go out to Joshua Tree for like a weekend, and I don't know what that's from, actually. No, I think it's just people hanging out at Pappy and Harriet's. I think it's just a Pappy's crowd. So that's the actual house that we shot at, the top one. And same thing, bottom left-hand corner. Their girls do cocaine, so there's some cocaine there. And then, we shot at this bar called Pappy and Harriet's, and so that parking sign and the people on the right, I believe, are actually hanging out at that bar. This is just two girls hanging out. There's a scene in the film when Aubrey and Elizabeth Olsen are sitting and talking, and I just liked this shot of two women hanging out. Young Adult was another movie with a good anti-hero. So this is the Ingrid page. So these are all film, shots and images that I felt like really represented the character of Ingrid. And I mean, you can see there's some pictures of Aubrey in there from other films. There's Tilda Swinton from We Need to Talk About Kevin. A couple
What's Jenny Slate one?
Huh?
What's that Jenny Slate one?
That's from Obvious Child. Yeah.
It's basically a lot of women unhinged.
Unhinged women, yes. Queen on Earth. There's a Queen of Earth?
Queen of.
Queen of Earth.
Oscar.
The phones is interesting because we were debating about how to show, the text messages and stuff in the film, and so I looked at films that use technology and phones, and sort of, I liked actually showing the phone and not having things pop up on the screen, like animations. That always bothers me when I see that in films. So obviously Taylor's, bright and colorful, and Jemima's in there. Just, again, it's really about creating a vibe. So, Ingrid's vibe is a lot more dark, anxious, edgy, unhinged, and Taylor's vibe is fun, clean, bright. And then, of course, Dan Pinto. We got some Batman memes in there, some vaping.
Gotham needs you. Batman to the rescue.
We can just kind of fly. There's a literal
It's like
video.
900 more pages to go.
Yeah, and then here's Nikki. So yeah, again, it's like, you know, he's kind of a party vibe. A lot
Here's
of
a question for
unity.
you. How much of these people were people that you're thinking about casting when you put them on here? So like when you have like,
Because like you have who
Like
you ended
Anders
up
Holm.
casting in every one of them.
Yeah, I knew who I wanted, and some of these people were just, you know, I couldn't find enough images of Billy Magnuson doing what
I have
I
those.
wanted him to do.
I went to college
You did?
with them, so I have
You
those.
have
Yeah.
it in your private
collection
collection.
flexing naked?
Yeah, so again, it was really just about finding supplementary stuff to be able to, you know, I knew I wanted Billy, but, you know, also if I didn't get him, there were some people that I was considering.
Like Adam Sandler.
Yeah. There's a lot of Father John Misty in this one. Some David Foster Wallace. There's this artist called The Most Famous Artist who was kind of our inspiration for Ezra's artwork in the film. So he did these two things on the right, and so he's like a guy that finds thrift store paintings and just paints things over top of them.
Was it, so this guy was after that white guy, the guy that got all the Press 62
Squat
paintings?
power.
Wait, what?
You know the guy at Press 62 who has all the landscape paintings that has white, almost like Hollywood block writing, Hollywood sign block writing. I mean, that's been there since like 1999.
Really?
Yeah.
Was this guy inspired by that, you know?
I have no
You
idea.
gotta go to Fred 62, check that out.
Yeah, it's right around the corner from my house. I mean, I've been there before, but I
Look
don't.
at the walls, yeah, it's like,
We can talk about this after. And then this is interesting. So there were two characters that were cut out of the film after we already shot it. So Ingrid had a sister character, and so these are some just interesting casualties of the editing process. But you know, we realized these characters were not necessary in the film, so we.
That's the best, right? When you shoot with actors and then you're like, yeah, you're not in the movie.
Yeah, that was a hard film.
It's not fun.
So that's the end.
That was great, thank you for sharing that with us. Matt, you and I actually last night were talking a little bit about this, about how films are a part of you, and but because like Ingrid is like a certain type of character, this film represents a little bit of you, but it also isn't you. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about that idea around like empathy, I guess, and maybe Brett, you can start because you kind of addressed this already about you know, you're not a 70-year-old man, or you're not a
70-year-old woman either.
yeah, exactly. And so I think I find that very interesting in your work, that it's so far from your own experience, yet somehow you need to connect to that.
Yeah, and I think the more that I write, the more I'm wanting to get further away from me. There's a lot of me in my movies, whether it be through the music or the art or the you know, just various lines or things. There's a lot of me, I think, in all of my films, and if you know me, you'd be like, that's such a Brett thing or a moment or whatever. But I'm more interested in putting myself in other people's shoes that I know